A millionaire CEO caught a little girl stealing bread, until he learned she wasn't a thief, just trying to feed her starving baby sister. It was almost midnight, and the restaurant's bright chandeliers were long turned off, leaving only the faint glow from the security lights reflecting off the polished counters. Alex Morrison, the millionaire owner, sat in his office, his blue suit jacket draped over the chair behind him. He was reviewing invoices and contracts, trying to drown himself in work as he did most nights. Ever since his daughter's death 3 years ago, he had found comfort only in the noise of business, spreadsheets, phone calls, numbers that didn't ask him how he was doing. But that night, something unusual happened. A faint rustling came from the kitchen. At first, he thought it was just the air conditioner kicking in, but then came another sound, the soft clatter of metal on tile. Alex frowned and rose from his chair. The restaurant had closed hours ago, and only he had the keys. Slowly, he walked down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The closer he got to the kitchen, the clearer the sounds became, small, uneven movements, like those of a frightened animal. He reached for his phone, turning on the flashlight, and pushed the kitchen door open. There, in the middle of the floor, crouched a little girl. She was maybe 6 years old, dressed in a worn, dirty pink dress. Her hair was tangled, her small hands clutching a piece of bread she had pulled from one of the baskets near the counter. The moment the light touched her, she froze. Her wide blue eyes filled with panic, and she took a step back, pressing the bread tightly to her chest. She looked so small against the stainless steel cabinets, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Alex blinked, not sure he was seeing right. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice firm but not unkind. The girl flinched and shook her head, her lips quivering. "Please don't call the police," she whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to take some bread. My little sister hasn't eaten in 2 days." The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The girl looked ready to run, her bare feet shifting nervously on the cold floor. He saw how thin she was, how her wrists seemed too fragile, her cheeks hollowed by hunger. Everything in him wanted to yell for help, to call someone, anyone, but instead, he crouched down slowly until he was at her level. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lily," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, sir. I just needed a little food. I'll put it back, please don't be angry." Alex's throat tightened. He noticed the way she avoided looking directly at him, as if she'd been scolded too many times before. He wanted to tell her everything was fine, that she didn't need to be afraid, but something in his chest stopped him. He hadn't spoken to a child in years. Not since Madison. The memory of his daughter's laughter, her tiny hands reaching for him, flashed before his eyes, and for a split second, the sight of Lily kneeling on the kitchen floor became unbearable. "Where's your sister now?" he asked, steadying his voice. Lily hesitated. "She's at home. She's only 2. I told her I'd come back quick. I promised." Alex nodded slowly. "And your parents?" Her silence was answer enough. She looked down, the bread trembling in her small hands. He took a deep breath. "All right. You're not in trouble, okay? You don't have to be afraid." She looked up at him for the first time, her blue eyes filled with confusion. "You're not going to call the police?" "No," he said quietly. "I'm not." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the man who had everything but felt empty inside, and the little girl who had nothing but still carried hope in her voice. Alex slowly stood up and reached for his phone again, but this time, not to call the police. He dialed his driver instead. "Bring the car around," he said. We're going somewhere. When he hung up, Lily took a step back, her eyes darting toward the door. You're taking me away? He shook his head. No. I'm taking you home. The girl blinked, not sure if she could believe him. You don't even know where I live. Then you'll show me, he said softly. And tomorrow, you and your sister are going to eat breakfast. Proper breakfast. Lily stared at him, her lower lip trembling. For a moment, she didn't move, then slowly nodded. Alex took off his jacket and draped it over her small shoulders. It swallowed her completely, but the warmth made her shiver in relief. As they stepped out into the cold night, he looked down at her walking beside him, her little hands clutching the bread like it was gold. And for the first time in 3 years, Alex Morrison felt something crack open inside him, a faint, fragile feeling he had thought was gone forever. Hope. The car rolled through the empty streets, the city sleeping under the soft orange glow of the streetlights. Lily sat beside Alex in silence, her tiny hands still clutching the piece of bread. Every few seconds, she would glance at him, then quickly turn back to the window, her reflection faint in the glass. The oversized jacket he'd given her made her look even smaller, almost swallowed whole by the weight of fabric and exhaustion. Alex didn't speak either, his thoughts were tangled, his chest tight. He had seen poverty before, of course. He donated to charities, funded shelters, wrote checks that his assistants handed out in his name. But sitting next to a starving child who had broken into his restaurant just to feed her sister felt completely different. It wasn't a statistic. It was painfully, heartbreakingly real. When the car stopped, Lily pointed toward a narrow alleyway that led to a sagging wooden house. The driver hesitated, but Alex nodded for him to stay. The wind was sharp as they stepped out, and the sound of loose shutters creaking filled the air. The house looked ready to collapse. Half of the siding had peeled off, and there was a faint smell of damp wood and mold. Lily ran ahead, opening the crooked door with effort. Inside, the dim light from the street barely illuminated the room. There was almost nothing, just a thin mattress in the corner, a small table with one broken leg, and a couple of blankets piled up like a makeshift bed. Emmy, Lily whispered softly, kneeling beside the mattress. A small figure stirred under the blanket, and then a sleepy little voice murmured, "Lily." The toddler's eyes fluttered open, big and blue, just like her sister's. When she saw the bread in Lily's hands, she smiled weakly. "You found food?" she asked, her voice fragile and hoarse. Lily nodded quickly, tearing the bread in half and giving a piece to Emmy. "See? I told you I'd bring something." Alex stood in the doorway, watching them. The younger one couldn't have been more than 2, her hair tangled, her skin pale. He could see her ribs even under the oversized t-shirt she wore. She took the bread in her tiny hands as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Something twisted deep inside his chest. He stepped forward slowly and crouched down beside them. "How long have you been living here?" he asked quietly. Lily looked up, wary at first, then shrugged. "Since winter. After Mama went to sleep and didn't wake up. The people who owned this house left, so we stayed. It's cold sometimes, but it's better than the streets." "And your father?" Her expression changed, fear mixed with bitterness. "He left before Mama got sick. He said he'd come back when he found work. But he didn't." She looked away quickly, trying to hide her trembling chin. "I take care of Emmy now." Alex didn't respond right away. He was looking around, taking in every detail of the place, the cracked window, the rusty tin cans, the thin trail of ashes in the corner where they had tried to make fire for warmth. His mind was spinning. He had walked past hundreds of people like them without ever stopping. How many had he ignored while sitting in his penthouse with heated floors and imported wine? How many times had he told himself that his donations were enough? He swallowed hard and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small chocolate bar he had grabbed from his office on the way out. "Here," he said softly, handing it to Emmy. The little girl's eyes lit up as she reached for it. "She's never had that before," Lily said quietly. "Mama used to tell us about it, though. She said it tastes like happiness." The words nearly broke him. He had no idea what to say, so he just smiled weakly and sat down on the floor beside them. The cold seeped through his expensive trousers, but for the first time in years, he didn't care about comfort or appearance. He watched as the sisters ate the bread slowly, carefully, making it last. After a few minutes, Lily looked at him with a hesitant frown. "Why are you helping us? You're not like the people around here." Alex thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe because I should have done something like this a long time ago." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded as if the answer was enough. Emmy, now curled up on her sister's lap, was already falling asleep, the chocolate still clutched in her tiny hand. The room was silent except for the sound of her soft breathing. Alex sat there for a long time, just watching them, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a quiet ache that wasn't entirely painful. When he finally stood, Lily looked up, alarmed. "Are you leaving?" "Not yet," he said. "But I'll come back tomorrow." Her eyes widened, as if she didn't believe him. "You don't have to." "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I do." As he stepped outside, the night air hit him again, but it felt different now, heavier, more alive. He stood by his car, looking back at the small house with its broken windows and flickering candlelight inside. He could still see Lily's silhouette through the glass, holding her sister close, humming softly the way only a child who had grown up too fast could. When Alex finally got into the car, the driver glanced at him through the mirror, uncertain. "Everything all right, sir?" Alex didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then out the window. "No," he said quietly. "But it will be." The following morning, Alex woke up earlier than usual. For years, his routine had been identical: wake at 6, shower, coffee, and immediately check emails from his international partners before even greeting anyone on his staff. But today, he couldn't bring himself to open his laptop. He couldn't stop thinking about the two little girls huddled together on that thin mattress, their faces pale and their hands shaking as they ate the piece of bread as if it were the finest meal in the world. His mind had replayed the scene over and over during the night, haunting him. It wasn't pity that kept him awake, but something deeper, a raw ache that stirred memories he had buried long ago. His daughter Madison's face kept appearing in his mind, her laugh echoing faintly in the silence of his enormous home. He could still remember the way she'd sneak into his office to bring him her drawings, proudly declaring that one day she would work beside him. She never got the chance. Since losing her, he had built his world around distance, control, and money, things that could not betray or die. But now, a little girl he didn't even know had cracked open something in him that he thought was sealed forever. Before leaving his mansion, he instructed his assistant to clear his schedule for the day and to have his car brought around. On the way, he stopped by a grocery store, surprising even himself by filling a cart with essentials: warm blankets, canned soup, milk, fresh fruit, medicine, and even a few toys. He didn't know what children liked anymore, but he figured anything soft or colorful might bring them a smile. When he arrived at the small, crumbling house, he saw the door open slightly. Lily was outside, trying to sweep away the snow that had drifted into the doorway. She was wearing the same dress from last night, her bare feet red from the cold. When she noticed him, she froze, the broom trembling in her hand. "You came back," she said quietly, her tone carrying a mix of surprise and disbelief. "I told you I would," Alex replied, stepping out of the car and motioning for his driver to help carry the bags. "I brought some things for you and Emmy." Her eyes widened as she saw the boxes being carried inside. "That's for us?" "Yes. You'll both get a proper meal today," he said, managing a small smile. Lily's lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you," and guided him inside. Emmy was awake this time, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. When she saw Alex, she hid behind her sister, clutching the tattered blanket. He knelt down and smiled softly. "Hi there. I'm Alex. I brought you some breakfast." He opened one of the bags and pulled out a small container of oatmeal, steam rising into the cold air. Emmy peeked out, her curiosity overcoming her fear, and slowly reached for the spoon Lily offered her. Watching them eat in silence, Alex felt his throat tighten. The way they savored every bite broke him in ways he didn't understand. After the meal, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor while Emmy played quietly with the small stuffed bear he'd brought. The sun was finally peeking through the clouds, painting the room with a fragile kind of light. Alex sat opposite Lily, resting his elbows on his knees. "Lily," he began carefully, "you can't stay here much longer. This place isn't safe. It's too cold, and you don't have enough food." She looked down, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "It's the only place we have. If we leave, where will we go? People don't want kids like us around." "Kids like you?" he asked gently. "Kids with no parents," she said simply, her voice flat but calm, as if she had said it so many times it had lost its meaning. He stared at her, unable to respond. No child should speak that way. He took a slow breath before saying, "What if I helped you? I could find somewhere better. A warm place, where you and your sister can stay. Would you let me do that?" Lily hesitated, her blue eyes full of caution. "Why? Why would you do that for us? You don't even know us." Alex paused for a long time, searching for the right words. "Maybe because I know what it's like to lose someone you love. And maybe I'm just tired of pretending that money is the only thing that matters." Lily studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "If you really mean it, I'll believe you." That night, Alex contacted a family friend who ran a private children's foundation. He explained the situation briefly, omitting his name to avoid attention, and arranged temporary housing for the sisters. By morning, a small apartment was ready, furnished and stocked with food. When he returned to tell Lily, she couldn't stop smiling. She held Emmy's hand tightly as if afraid the promise might disappear if she let go. When he led them to the car, she turned back to the old house one last time. "We won't come back here, will we?" she asked softly. "No," Alex said, his voice steady but heavy. "You won't need to." As they drove through the city, Lily's eyes widened at every streetlight, every passing building. Emmy pressed her face against the window, gasping at the sight of a bakery with rows of pastries. Alex found himself watching them more than the road ahead. He had spent his life chasing bigger numbers, larger deals, higher floors, but none of it had ever made him feel what he was feeling now, this strange, quiet satisfaction of simply being useful. When they arrived at the new apartment, Lily ran from room to room in disbelief. There were warm blankets on the beds, clean clothes in the closet, even a small bookshelf with children's stories. Emmy found a teddy bear on the pillow and squealed with joy. Alex stood by the doorway, overwhelmed. It had taken him years to realize that helping someone else didn't weaken him, it made him human again. Before he left, Lily hugged him for the first time. It was quick and shy, but it stopped him in his tracks. "Thank you, Mr. Alex," she whispered. I don't think anyone's ever done something like this for us before. He smiled faintly, resting a hand on her shoulder. Get some rest, okay? Tomorrow's going to be a better day. As he stepped out into the night, he felt the weight of the cold air again, but this time, it didn't seem as bitter. For the first time in years, Alex Morrison didn't go home to an empty silence. He went home feeling like maybe, just maybe, his heart was beginning to wake up. The next few days passed in a strange blur for Alex, who found himself thinking about Lily and Emmy far more than he intended. He had made a quiet promise to himself that this would just be a temporary act of kindness, something to ease his conscience and give the girls a start before he found them proper guardians through his contacts at the foundation. But every time he tried to let go, something in him resisted. Each morning before work, he stopped by their small apartment to bring food, check on them, or sometimes just to see their faces. The first time he arrived unexpectedly, he found Lily standing on a chair washing dishes far too big for her small hands while Emmy sat on the counter humming softly, swinging her legs. They both looked up the moment they heard his footsteps. You came back again, Lily said, smiling shyly. I told Emmy you would. Alex smiled faintly and set a grocery bag on the table. Of course I did. I brought something for breakfast. How are you both doing? Lily's face brightened at the sight of fruit and bread, things she rarely saw before. This is so much, she whispered as if afraid it might vanish if she spoke too loudly. He spent the rest of the morning fixing the loose hinge on their window and tightening the legs on a wobbly chair, small tasks that seemed meaningless but felt strangely important. When he finally left for work, he caught a glimpse of them standing by the window, waving. That image stayed with him the entire day. During meetings, while his team discussed profits and future expansion plans, he found himself drifting off, thinking of Lily's cautious smile and the way Emmy's eyes lit up when she tasted warm soup for the first time. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but no one dared to question him. Alex Morrison had always been known as a hard man, focused, demanding, always chasing results. But now, something had shifted. That evening, he received a call from the foundation coordinator, who informed him that there were procedures to follow if he wanted to officially sponsor the girls' care. The woman on the phone spoke in a detached, bureaucratic tone, listing policies and background checks, but Alex's patience snapped halfway through. I'll take full responsibility, he said sharply. They're not another case file. They're children. I'll make sure they're safe myself. He hung up before she could protest. The decision surprised even him. He had spent years keeping people at arm's length, yet now he was ready to rearrange his entire life for two children he'd met by chance. When he visited the next day, Lily greeted him with a piece of paper in her hands. I drew this, she said proudly, showing him a picture of three stick figures holding hands, a tall one in a suit, a girl with messy hair, and a tiny figure with a bow. That's you, me, and Emmy. Alex stared at the drawing for a long time, something tightening in his chest. You made me look taller than I am, he said, trying to keep his voice light. Lily giggled, the sound filling the small apartment with warmth that money could never buy. As the days turned into weeks, Alex found himself growing deeply attached to the sisters. He began spending his evenings reading to them, buying small things like books and puzzles, even hiring a doctor to make sure Emmy was healthy. The doctor later told him quietly that the little girl was undernourished but recovering well thanks to regular meals. Alex felt both relieved and guilty. He couldn't stop wondering how long they had suffered before he found them. One rainy night, as thunder rolled across the city, Lily woke up crying from a nightmare. When Alex rushed into the living room, she clung to him without hesitation. I dreamt Mama was calling me, but I couldn't find her, she whispered into his chest. He froze for a second, unsure what to do. Then, instinctively, he wrapped his arms around her. It's okay, he murmured softly. You're safe now. I promise. She eventually fell asleep in his arms, her small hand clutching his sleeve. He sat there for hours, staring at the rain outside, realizing how long it had been since anyone had needed him like this, not as a boss, not as a businessman, but as a person. The next morning, when Lily woke up, she looked embarrassed. Sorry, I didn't mean to cry, she said, her voice small. Alex shook his head. Don't ever apologize for that, he told her. You're allowed to feel things. You're allowed to miss her. She smiled faintly and nodded, her eyes shining with something between sadness and trust. By the end of that week, Alex had already arranged for Lily to start school. When he told her the news, she froze in disbelief. School? But I don't have clothes, or books. He knelt down so he could look her in the eye. You'll have everything you need. All you have to do is learn and take care of Emmy. She threw her arms around him before he could react, whispering, "Thank you, Mr. Alex." That night, as he sat alone in his office overlooking the city lights, Alex thought about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. For the first time since losing Madison, he wasn't haunted by silence. He thought of the girls' laughter, their small voices filling his home, the sound of Emmy's giggles when he tickled her tiny feet. It was strange and new, but also healing. Without realizing it, he had started to live again, not for profit, not for appearances, but for something real. He didn't yet know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. The first day of school arrived sooner than anyone expected, and Lily stood in front of the mirror nervously pulling at the sleeves of her new sweater. It was pale blue, soft and perfectly her size, but she kept touching it as if afraid it might disappear. Emmy sat nearby, playing with a small doll Alex had bought her, while Alex himself waited by the doorway with a strange feeling twisting in his chest. It had been years since he had experienced something like this, helping someone get ready for their first day, making sure lunch was packed, reminding them not to forget their backpack. He had done all of it once before, long ago, when his daughter Madison had started preschool, but back then his wife had been there, smiling, teasing him for checking her bag twice. The memory was so vivid that it almost hurt, yet this time the ache was softer, less sharp, as if Lily's presence had begun to heal something he thought was broken forever. When the car pulled up in front of the small community school, Lily grew quiet. Children ran past, laughing, while parents chatted nearby, holding coffee cups and snapping photos. Lily clutched Alex's hand tightly, her knuckles turning white. "What if they don't like me?" she whispered. "What if they ask where my mom is?" Alex crouched down to meet her gaze, his blue eyes calm and steady. "You don't have to worry about that," he said gently. "You're brave, Lily. That's something no one can teach. Just be yourself, and people will see who you really are." She nodded slowly, though fear still lingered in her eyes. He walked her to the entrance, and before she stepped inside, she turned and said in a small voice, "Will you come back for me after?" Alex smiled and promised he would. The hours that followed were restless. He tried to focus on work but found himself staring at the clock every few minutes. His assistant, noticing his distraction, didn't dare comment. He was known as the kind of man who always demanded perfection, but lately, something had softened him. When the meeting with his investors began, he barely heard a word they said. His mind was in a classroom across town, picturing a small girl with blue eyes sitting alone at a desk, wondering if she was doing okay. When he finally couldn't stand it anymore, he left early, telling his staff he had an emergency. When he arrived at the school, he saw Lily sitting on the steps outside, swinging her legs and clutching a small paper with her name written in large, shaky letters. She looked up as soon as she heard his footsteps, her face lighting up with relief. "You came," she said, running toward him. "Of course I did," Alex said, smiling as he ruffled her hair. How was your day? She hesitated, glancing down at the ground. It was okay. The teacher was nice. But some of the kids laughed because I said I didn't have a dad. The words hit him harder than he expected. He felt a lump form in his throat, but he forced a smile. You don't have to listen to them. You have people who care about you. That's what matters. Lily looked up at him and said softly, like you. Alex didn't answer right away. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder and said, yeah. Like me. That night, after dinner, Lily sat on the couch next to him reading a children's book out loud. Her voice was careful, uncertain at first, but she grew more confident with every line. Emmy had already fallen asleep on Alex's lap, her tiny hand clutching his sleeve. The moment was so peaceful that it felt like time had slowed down. He could hear the faint hum of the city outside the window, the rhythm of Lily's voice filling the room. For once, the silence of his penthouse didn't feel lonely, it felt alive. As the weeks went by, life found a strange new rhythm. Lily went to school every day, Emmy grew healthier and happier, and Alex became part of their world in ways he never planned. He found himself picking up groceries on his way home, learning how to braid hair from a tutorial after Lily asked him to help one morning, and even laughing again, a real laugh, the kind that shook him because he hadn't heard it in so long. The staff at his company began whispering among themselves about how different he had become. His temper was gone, replaced by patience and warmth. He still worked hard, but the drive that once came from ambition now came from something deeper, a need to make the world a little better for two small girls who had unknowingly changed his life. One evening, as he tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with a curious expression. "Mr. Alex, can I ask something?" He smiled and nodded. "Anything." She hesitated, playing with the edge of her blanket. "Do you think my mom can see me from the sky? I want her to know I'm okay now." His chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I think she can, Lily. I think she's very proud of you. And I think she's grateful that you're still so strong." Lily smiled softly, closing her eyes. "I hope so," she whispered. He sat beside her for a while, watching as her breathing slowed. Something about the way she slept reminded him of Madison, and for the first time, it didn't fill him with pain, it filled him with peace. Later that night, Alex stood on his balcony overlooking the city. The light stretched endlessly before him, cold and bright, but for once they didn't seem so distant. He thought about everything that had brought him here, the wealth, the losses, the loneliness, and how none of it compared to the quiet joy of hearing Lily laugh or seeing Emmy run across the room. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped saving them. They were saving him. Winter deepened, and the city seemed to slow under the weight of cold air and gray skies. For Alex, however, the season felt strangely different this year. For the first time in years, he didn't dread the holidays or the silence of his home. The apartment, once sterile and echoing, now carried traces of life, laughter, tiny footsteps, and the soft sound of music boxes Lily had found in a thrift shop. Every morning, he woke to the smell of toast burning in the kitchen because Lily tried to make breakfast before he came in, insisting she was helping. He had long stopped correcting her and simply learned to enjoy the imperfect moments. Emmy had started speaking more, too, her once timid voice growing stronger each day. She followed Alex around the house like a shadow, holding onto his pant leg whenever he was about to leave. He never thought he'd get used to hearing someone call his name in that small, innocent voice, but now he couldn't imagine his days without it. Still, beneath the warmth, there was something else brewing inside him, a quiet fear. He knew that what they had built together existed in a fragile balance. He wasn't their father, not legally or even by blood, but each day that passed made the idea of losing them feel unbearable. He had spent his life avoiding attachment because losing one person had destroyed him. Now, two small girls had slipped past every defense he'd ever built, and he didn't know how to live without them anymore. That realization scared him more than anything. One morning, as he dropped Lily off at school, a woman approached him, thin, sharp-eyed, and with a clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as a social worker from the Child Welfare Department. "We've received reports about 2 minors under your care," she said crisply. "There are questions about their guardianship status and living arrangements." Alex's jaw tightened as he listened. The idea of someone questioning his intentions made his blood run cold. "They're safe," he said flatly. "I've provided for them, given them a home, education, and medical care. What more do you need?" The woman gave him a rehearsed, polite smile. "It's not about what we need, Mr. Morrison. It's about what the law requires. We'll need documentation, consent forms, background checks. Until then, the children may be placed in temporary care." The words hit him like a blow. That night, he barely slept. Lily noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You're quiet," she said as she sat beside him on the couch, her eyes full of worry. He hesitated but finally told her the truth in a way she could understand. "There are people who think you and Emmy shouldn't live with me until they check everything. But I promise you, I won't let anyone take you away." She didn't say anything at first, but after a long pause, she whispered, "I believe you." Over the next few days, Alex buried himself in paperwork, meetings, and calls. His influence and money, once tools for power, became weapons to protect 2 little lives. His lawyers prepared every document the system could possibly ask for. Yet despite all his resources, there was a moment that nearly broke him. When an official arrived to interview Lily at the school, she panicked, thinking they were there to separate her from Alex. She ran out of the classroom crying and refused to speak until she saw him waiting by the gate. When she reached him, she clung to his coat with trembling hands. "They said we might have to leave," she sobbed. "But you promised." He knelt down, holding her tightly. "And I keep my promises," he said firmly, his voice shaking. "No one is taking you anywhere." Later that evening, after Lily had calmed down, Alex sat alone in his study, staring at a framed picture of his late wife and daughter. For years, he had avoided looking at it, but now he found comfort instead of pain. "You'd probably tell me I'm crazy," he murmured softly. "But I think you'd like them." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from both sorrow and peace. The next morning, the social worker returned, this time with a different expression. "I've reviewed your case, Mr. Morrison," she said, setting her papers on the table. "It's clear the children are thriving under your care. I spoke to Lily's teachers, they described her as bright, happy, and improving rapidly. The younger one is healthy and affectionate. It's rare to see such stability in these circumstances." Alex felt the tension in his chest begin to ease. "So what does that mean?" he asked carefully. The woman smiled, a genuine one this time. "It means they're staying where they belong." That night, when he told Lily and Emmy the news, their joy filled the apartment. Lily jumped up and hugged him tightly, laughing through tears. "I told you they wouldn't take us," she cried. Emmy, not understanding everything but sensing the happiness, clapped her small hands and hugged both of them. Alex lifted them into his arms, holding them close as if to promise they would never have to be afraid again. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man trying to rebuild his life, he felt like a man who finally had one. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Alex stood by their doorway, watching them sleep. Lily's arm was draped protectively over her sister, their faces calm and content. He realized then that love wasn't about blood or legal papers, it was about showing up, about staying when it was hardest, about choosing someone again and again no matter the cost. He turned off the light quietly and whispered to himself, "I'm not losing them. Not this time." Then he walked away, his heart lighter than it had been in years, carrying the quiet certainty that these two small souls, was what he had been searching for all along. The months that followed felt like an entirely new chapter of Alex's life, one that he had never expected but had secretly longed for without even realizing it. The apartment, which once echoed with silence and the faint hum of machinery, had transformed into something vibrant, full of life and small, imperfect beauty. Lily's laughter filled the rooms, Emmy's drawings covered the fridge, and the once immaculate floors were now occasionally dotted with crumbs, toys, and crayons. Alex, the man who used to control every detail of his environment, didn't seem to mind at all. In fact, he found peace in the chaos. He woke up earlier now, not because of business meetings, but to prepare breakfast before Lily's school bus arrived. Sometimes she would sit beside him at the kitchen counter, her hair still messy from sleep, and tell him about dreams she had, dreams filled with light and warmth, far from the shadows that used to haunt her. Emmy, too young for words as big as her sisters, would simply sit on his lap, clinging to his tie and giggling when he made faces at her. These small, ordinary moments had become his new success stories, and for the first time in his life, they felt more meaningful than any award or deal he had ever earned. But despite the happiness, there were nights when Alex would sit awake, unable to sleep, haunted by the ghosts of what could have been. He would think about the life he had before, the family he lost, the crushing loneliness that had driven him into his work until he no longer recognized himself. And now, as he looked at Lily and Emmy sleeping peacefully down the hall, he couldn't stop wondering if he deserved this second chance. He had spent years building walls to keep out pain, but love, in its purest form, had slipped through those cracks and taken root before he could stop it. One weekend, he decided to take the girls out of the city. They drove for hours until the skyline faded into open fields and the air felt cleaner, lighter. It was spring, and the countryside was alive with color, green hills, wildflowers, and sunlight that spilled across the road like gold. Emmy pressed her face against the car window, squealing with excitement every time she saw a cow or horse. Lily, sitting in the back seat, kept asking questions about everything they passed. Do people really live in those little houses? Why are the trees all different colors? Alex answered every one of them with patience, even when her curiosity turned into a flood of endless chatter. When they arrived at a small lakeside cabin he had rented, Lily jumped out of the car and spun around with her arms wide open, shouting, "It's so big." Alex watched her with quiet amusement, remembering how his own daughter once reacted the same way on her first trip to the countryside. They spent the weekend walking through trails, feeding ducks by the water, and sitting by a fire that crackled late into the night. It was there, under the stars, that Lily asked the question that caught him completely off guard. "Mr. Alex," she began softly, staring into the flames, "if we're not your real family, why do you care about us so much?" He froze, unsure of how to answer at first. The words that came next weren't rehearsed, they came straight from the place he had kept locked away for too long. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who you find when you need them the most." Lily's eyes glistened in the light of the fire, and after a long pause, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then I'm glad we found you," she whispered. That night, long after the girls had fallen asleep, Alex stood outside the cabin looking up at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt something close to forgiveness, not from others, but from himself. The guilt he had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by gratitude. He realized that maybe Madison and his wife, wherever they were, had sent these girls to him not as a replacement, but as a reminder that love didn't die with loss. It simply changed form, waiting to be rediscovered. When they returned to the city, life slowly resumed its rhythm, but something inside Alex had permanently shifted. He began dedicating more time to charity work, not as a public act to polish his image, but as a quiet effort to help others like Lily and Emmy. He partnered with local shelters and started a foundation to support children in crisis. When reporters asked what inspired him, he simply said, "Someone once taught me what it means to be given a second chance." He didn't mention the girls by name, but everyone in his company could tell that they had become the heart of his world. Weeks later, during an important charity gala, Lily and Emmy joined him for the first time. They wore matching white dresses that made them look like tiny angels under the chandeliers. Alex introduced them to his colleagues as "my family," and the words came out effortlessly, as if they had always been true. Throughout the evening, he kept glancing at them across the room, watching as Lily carefully explained to Emmy how to use a fork properly or whispered jokes that made her giggle. He realized then that love had made him richer than any amount of money ever could. That night, when they got home, Lily hugged him before going to bed. "Do you think we'll always stay together?" she asked sleepily. Alex knelt down, looking into her eyes. "I promise you," he said softly, "no matter what happens, you'll never be alone again." She smiled, content, and ran off to her room. As he turned off the lights and walked down the hallway, Alex felt a sense of calm that he hadn't known in years. He had started this journey by accident, but now it was the most meaningful thing he had ever done. For the first time since the tragedy that broke his old life, he wasn't a man haunted by the past, he was a man building a future, one small, hopeful day at a time. The day that changed everything began like any other. The morning sun poured softly through the curtains, filling the apartment with a golden glow, and the city outside hummed with quiet life. Alex was in the kitchen making pancakes while Emmy giggled from her seat, swinging her legs as Lily tried to pour orange juice without spilling. It was ordinary and messy, yet perfect in ways he couldn't explain. For the first time in years, his life no longer felt like something that needed fixing, it felt whole. He looked at the two girls and realized that they had become the heartbeat of his world. Every meeting, every decision, every choice he made now revolved around them. His empire no longer existed just to make him richer, it existed to build something better, something lasting, something human. Later that morning, they drove together to a park on the edge of the city. It was the same park he used to visit when his own daughter was alive, but this time, the memories didn't bring him pain. They walked under trees that had started to bloom again, a sign that spring had fully returned. Lily ran ahead chasing a stray balloon, while Emmy toddled after her, laughing so hard she nearly fell. Watching them, Alex felt something inside him melt completely. He didn't think about the company he had built, the board meetings waiting for him on Monday, or the headlines that once defined his worth. All he thought about was how miraculous it felt to be here, to have been broken once and still be capable of this kind of love again. But fate has a way of testing the things we cherish most. That afternoon, as they packed up to leave, a sleek black car pulled up near the park's gate. Two people stepped out, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a man in a formal suit. They introduced themselves as representatives from the Child Welfare Department. Alex immediately felt his stomach drop. The woman spoke kindly but firmly, explaining that they had received a new claim. A distant relative of Lily and Emmy's mother had come forward, saying she wanted custody. The news hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, he couldn't even speak. He had spent months proving that the girls were safe, loved, thriving, and now, someone who hadn't cared until now wanted to take them away. He looked over at Lily, who stood a few feet away, sensing something was wrong, and his heart broke. The following days blurred into an exhausting series of meetings, legal filings, and emotional strain. Alex's lawyers worked tirelessly, but the system was slow and merciless. The woman claiming custody was the girl's aunt, someone who hadn't been in contact for years but now saw a chance to gain financial benefit. It was a cruel irony that someone with no love for the children might have a stronger legal claim than the man who would give anything for them. Every night, Lily cried herself to sleep, terrified of being taken away. Emmy clung to Alex's arm constantly, refusing to let go. He stayed strong for them, even when the weight of it all made him feel like he was breaking inside. He kept reminding them, no matter what happens, I'm not giving up on you. I promised you'd never be alone again, and I meant it. When the court date finally arrived, the girls sat in the hallway outside while Alex faced the judge. His voice didn't shake, but his hands did. He told them everything: the day he found Lily in the restaurant kitchen, the nights he stayed awake when she was sick, the first time Emmy called his name. He spoke not as a businessman or a millionaire, but as a man who had finally found something worth more than all the success in the world. The opposing lawyer tried to paint him as someone using charity to soothe his guilt, but the sincerity in his words silenced the room. At one point, Lily stood up and asked if she could speak. The judge allowed it, and she walked to the front of the courtroom, clutching her small hands together. He's not just someone who helps us, she said, her voice trembling but steady. He's our family. He makes breakfast for us, reads us stories, and stays when we have nightmares. Please don't take us away again. The room went silent. Even the hardest faces softened. The decision came days later, but when it did, it felt like time stopped. The judge ruled in Alex's favor, granting him full guardianship of both girls. When the news reached them, Lily burst into tears, running into his arms. Emmy clapped her tiny hands and shouted his name over and over. For a moment, Alex just held them both, speechless, his eyes wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. All the pain, all the struggle, all the sleepless nights had led to this moment of peace. He wasn't just their guardian now. He was their father in every way that mattered. Months passed, and their lives settled into a rhythm that felt both new and timeless. The mansion that once stood empty now echoed with laughter, music, and the warmth of family dinners. Alex learned how to slow down, to leave work early so he could help Lily with her homework or teach Emmy how to ride a bike. The company still thrived, but he no longer chased numbers, he chased moments. One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Lily approached him with a small piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. She smiled shyly. "It's for you. It's an adoption certificate I made myself." On the paper, written in her uneven handwriting, were the words, "Alex Morrison, our forever dad." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he did both. He lifted her into his arms and whispered, "Forever sounds perfect." Years later, when people spoke of Alex Morrison, they didn't just talk about his wealth or his company, they spoke about the man who turned his tragedy into purpose, who built not just an empire but a family. He never remarried, but he never felt alone again. Every morning began with laughter, and every night ended with the quiet peace of knowing that love, once lost, had found its way back to him. And sometimes, when he stood by the window watching the lights of the city, he thought about how strange life could be, that a single moment of kindness, one choice to help a frightened little girl in a restaurant kitchen, had rewritten everything. It reminded him that even the most broken hearts could find their way home again, and that family wasn't something you were given, it was something you built, one act of love at a time.